A millionaire finds this homeless girl sleeping in his doghouse. When he discovers the reason why she slept there, he runs away because of it. Comment. What you think is going to happen? Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel. To support my work, your help is very important. Thunder echoed across the Vanderbilt mansion as the rain relentlessly pounded against the windows. George, a 52-year-old man whose graying hair at the temples betrayed his worries more than his age, paced restlessly through the hallways of his house in upstate New York. The storm had started hours ago, and his dog, a German shepherd named Thor, wouldn't stop barking in the backyard. Annoyed by the animal's persistence, George grabbed an umbrella and went out to check what was happening. The strong wind almost ripped the umbrella from his hands as he crossed the manicured lawn towards Thor's doghouse. It was then that his heart nearly stopped. Through the door of the doghouse, he saw a small, huddled figure. He approached cautiously and, to his surprise, found a little girl sleeping, snuggled against Thor's soft fur. Her clothes were soaked and dirty, and her face, even in her sleep, carried an expression of deep sadness. George gently touched her shoulder, startling her awake. "It's okay, little one. I'm not going to hurt you," he said, trying to keep his voice gentle despite the shock of the situation. The girl, who appeared to be about 6 years old, looked at him with big, dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets larger than her age. "What's your name?" George asked, crouching down to her level. "Iris," she replied in a whisper, while Thor licked her hand affectionately. "Are you alone? Where are your parents?" The girl lowered her eyes and hugged the dog tighter. "I ran away from the shelter," she mumbled. "I don't want to go back there." At that moment, Eleanor Ainsworth, the 61-year-old housekeeper who had worked for the Vanderbilt family for decades, appeared at the back door of the mansion. "Good heavens, Mr. George, what's going on here?" "Eleanor, prepare a hot bath and set out some dry clothes and get her something to eat," George ordered, surprising himself with the speed of his decision. Inside the mansion, while Iris was taking a bath assisted by Eleanor, George paced back and forth in his study. Something about that girl deeply intrigued him. Since his traumatic divorce 5 years ago, he had closed himself off from the world, dedicating himself only to business. Why then did he feel so compelled to help that child? When Iris came down to eat, wearing an old t-shirt that looked more like a dress on her, George watched her carefully. There was something familiar in her gestures, in the way her eyes scanned the room, cataloguing every detail. "You ran away from the shelter today?" he asked, sitting at the kitchen table while she ate a plate of hot soup. Iris shook her head. 3 days ago," she replied, blowing on the spoon carefully. "But I only found Thor today." Eleanor, who was watching the scene leaning against the kitchen counter, crossed herself. "Mercy, child. Where have you been sleeping all this time?" The girl shrugged, focused on her soup. It was then that something extraordinary happened. She began to hum softly a melody that made George freeze in his chair. It was the same song that his mother used to sing when he was little, an old and almost forgotten lullaby. That night, after Eleanor settled Iris into one of the guest rooms, George couldn't sleep. The melody wouldn't leave his head, nor would the feeling that there was something bigger behind the girl's appearance. In the early hours of the morning, he heard voices coming from the room where Iris was sleeping. He approached the door silently and listened to the girl talking, apparently alone. "She said the treasure is safe. Yes, I know how to keep a secret." George's heart raced. Treasure? Could it be possible that she knew something about the family heirloom that disappeared so long ago? The gold locket that belonged to his great-grandmother, valued at millions, which vanished mysteriously after the factory accident. The next morning, while having his coffee, George received a call that would change everything. It was Barbara Klein, the social worker responsible for the shelter from which Iris had fled. Her grave and professional voice echoed through the phone. "Mr. Vanderbilt, we have been informed that the minor Iris is at your residence. I need you to bring her back immediately." It was at that moment that George made a decision that would transform his life forever. "Actually, Ms. Klein, I would like to discuss the possibility of Iris remaining under my care temporarily." What George didn't know was that his brother, Thomas, on the other side of town, had just received disturbing information about the girl's past, information that threatened to destroy not only George's plans, but the entire empire that the Vanderbilt family had built over generations. 3 weeks had passed since Iris arrived at the Vanderbilt mansion. Barbara Klein, the 43-year-old social worker, had agreed to allow the girl's temporary stay, but her weekly visits were marked by a suspicious look and endless notes on her clipboard. On that September morning, as the sun began to warm the cobblestone streets of upstate New York, George watched Iris playing in the garden with Thor. The girl had the peculiar habit of whispering in the dog's ear as if sharing important secrets. From time to time, she looked at a specific point in the garden, near the old, disused well, and remained silent for long minutes. "Have you noticed how she talks to the plants?" Eleanor commented, approaching with a tray of coffee. The housekeeper didn't hide her concern about the situation. "Just yesterday I caught her talking to the jasmine bush, saying that the story lady had shown her where the key was." George swallowed hard. It wasn't the first time Iris had mentioned this mysterious lady. The previous week, during dinner, the girl had described in impressive detail the old floral dress that his mother used to wear on Sundays. Information she had no way of knowing. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Thomas, his younger brother, wanting to schedule an urgent meeting. His voice sounded strange, filled with a poorly disguised anxiety. "We need to talk about the girl, George," Thomas said. "I've discovered some things you need to know." "What kind of things?" George asked, watching Iris make a crown of wildflowers. "Not over the phone. Meet me at the office in an hour." The Vanderbilt Enterprises office was in the center of town, in an old commercial building that had belonged to the family for generations. George asked Eleanor to keep an eye on Iris and left, his mind divided between curiosity about his brother's discoveries and the growing suspicion that the girl could lead him to his family's lost treasure. Thomas was already waiting for him, sitting behind his mahogany desk with a brown folder in his hands. His face was pale, and beads of sweat glistened on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Do you have any idea where this girl came from?" Thomas asked without preamble. "She was found wandering near the ruins of the old factory, George. The same factory where our parents—" "You don't need to continue," George interrupted sharply. "The accident that took his parents was still an open wound, even after 15 years. But that's not all." Thomas continued, opening the folder. "I managed to access the shelter's records. There's no information about her past before she was found. It's as if she appeared out of nowhere." George sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "Why are you investigating the girl, Thomas?" "Because you've changed since she arrived. You're different. And now with these connections to the factory, don't you think that's too suspicious?" Before George could answer, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Eleanor. "Come quickly. Something happened to the girl." George's heart raced. He stood up abruptly, leaving Thomas talking to himself, and drove back home in record time. He found Eleanor in the library, her normally serene face contorted in an expression of astonishment. "What happened?" he asked, breathless. "The girl—" "She was drawing, as she always does after lunch, but this time—" Eleanor pointed to a series of drawings scattered on the coffee table. George approached and felt his blood run cold. The drawings showed, with frightening precision for a 6-year-old child, the interior of the old factory, details that only someone who knew the place could know. The spiral staircase that led to the main office, the large arched windows, and even the safe built into the wall, the same safe where the locket had been kept for the last time. "Where is she now?" George asked, his voice trembling slightly. "In her room, sleeping. After she finished the drawings, she started crying uncontrollably, saying that her head hurt. I gave her some chamomile tea, and she fell asleep." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, George returned to the library. He studied each drawing meticulously, looking for clues, signs, anything that could indicate where his family's treasure was. It was then that he noticed something strange. In one of the drawings, partially hidden behind a curtain, there was what appeared to be a small door. A door that he didn't remember existing in the factory. His heart quickened. Could it be possible that Iris, in some inexplicable way, knew secrets of the factory that even he didn't know? A soft noise made him turn around. Iris was standing in the doorway of the library, her dark hair disheveled from sleep, holding something in her hands that gleamed in the lamplight. "The story lady said you were going to find the drawings today," she said, her childish voice filled with a seriousness that didn't match her age. "She also told me to give you this." George approached slowly. In Iris's small hands was an old gold locket, identical to the one his mother wore on the day of the accident. A locket that everyone believed had been destroyed along with the other jewelry. Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Before Iris could answer, thunder echoed in the distance, announcing another storm. The girl shivered and, in a quick movement, put the locket in her pajama pocket. "Not yet," she whispered, as if repeating someone's instructions. She said, "It's not time yet." Outside the mansion, protected by the darkness, Thomas watched the scene through the library window, his face contorted in an expression of anger and determination. In his hands, a folder contained documents that could change everything. Documents about a former employee named Celeste Berger, who had disappeared on the same day as the factory accident, taking with her secrets that could destroy the Vanderbilt family forever. And now, 15 years later, a mysterious girl appeared, bringing to light long-buried truths. What Thomas didn't yet know was that his own actions of the past were about to come back to haunt him, and that the real treasure that Iris guarded was not what anyone imagined. The arrival of October brought with it a sweltering heat to upstate New York, but it wasn't just the weather that made George sweat. In recent weeks, the events at the Vanderbilt mansion had become increasingly intriguing and disturbing. After the locket episode, Iris began to have frequent nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night screaming disjointed words about a hidden door and important papers. Concerned about the girl's well-being, George decided to hire a private tutor. Olivia Peterson, 29, arrived one Monday morning with her colorful framed glasses and a welcoming smile. A graduate in pedagogy with a specialization in special education, she had something in her gaze that conveyed confidence. "Iris is an extraordinary child," Olivia commented after the first week of classes. She was sitting in George's office, flipping through a notebook filled with drawings and mathematical calculations too complex for a 6-year-old girl. Her spatial visualization ability is impressive, and there's something else. George leaned over the table, interested. "Something else?" "Yes. When I showed her some old photos of upstate New York for a local history activity, she had a strange reaction when she saw the old Vanderbilt factory. She started to tremble and drew this." Olivia held out a folded piece of paper. The drawing showed the interior of a room that George knew well, the factory's main office. But there were details that he had never noticed before. A series of numbers written in the margins, a specific pattern on the wallpaper, and that same mysterious door that had appeared in the previous drawing. "Did she say anything about the drawing?" he asked, studying every detail. "She just muttered something about the lady's papers." After that, she was silent for the rest of the lesson. That same afternoon, Barbara Klein made a surprise visit. The social worker seemed more serious than usual, her eyebrows furrowed as she watched Iris playing in the garden with Thor. "Mr. Vanderbilt, we need to talk," she said, her professional tone barely disguising her concern. "You still haven't started the official adoption process. Why?" The question hit George like a punch. Amid his search for the treasure and the mysteries surrounding Iris, he had neglected the most important part, the girl's future. "I was waiting for the right moment," he replied, realizing how empty his excuse sounded. "The right moment?" Barbara adjusted her glasses, her gaze penetrating. "Or do you have other reasons for keeping Iris here?" Before George could answer, a sharp scream cut through the air. In the garden, Iris was kneeling near the old well, her hands digging frantically into the earth. Everyone ran to her. The girl had unearthed something, a small metal box, corroded by time. Her hands trembled as she tried to open it. "She said it would be here," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. "She said this would explain everything." George gently took the box from Iris's hands. Inside, he found a yellowed envelope and a small notebook with handwriting he would recognize. Anywhere, his mother's. That night, after Barbara left with an ultimatum about the adoption process and Iris finally fell asleep, George locked himself in his study with the box. The notebook contained notes about irregularities at the factory, employee names, and a series of numbers that matched those in Iris's drawings. But it was the envelope that made his world collapse. Inside was a letter dated the day of the accident, written by Celeste Berger. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, as agreed, I have kept the documents in a safe place. Your son Thomas must not find out that we know about the embezzlement and the sabotage he is planning. If anything happens to me, look in." The letter ended abruptly. George felt the blood run cold in his veins. His own brother? Could it be possible? A noise at the door startled him. It was Eleanor, her face as pale as wax. "Mr. George," she whispered, "there's something you need to see. I found this in the girl's room." In her trembling hands was an old photograph, yellowed by time. It showed Celeste Berger holding a baby in her arms in front of the factory. On the back, a date and a note. "Iris, 3 months. May God protect us." "This isn't possible," George murmured, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together in a way he never imagined. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Thomas, his voice choked. "I found her, George. I found Celeste Berger. She's coming back to upstate New York, and you won't believe what she has to tell." On the other side of the mansion, in Iris's room, the girl sat on her bed, talking to what seemed to be just empty air. But on her face was an expression of deep understanding, as if she finally understood her role in a story much bigger than herself. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered into the empty space. "I know it's time. I've kept all your secrets, as I promised. But now they need to know the truth." The wind blew through the open window, making the curtains dance. On the nightstand, the gold locket shone softly under the moonlight, like a silent promise that all secrets eventually come to light. And some of them have the power to change everything we thought we knew about love, family, and redemption. The tension at the Vanderbilt mansion was at its peak that Thursday morning. Celeste Berger had arrived in upstate New York the night before, and a meeting was scheduled for that day. George barely slept, turning over in his mind all the possibilities, all the unanswered questions that had tormented him for months. Olivia arrived early for her lesson with Iris, but found the girl different. Her usual detailed drawings had given way to nervous scribbles and increasingly complex mathematical equations. "Something's different today," Olivia commented, watching Iris solve advanced math problems as if they were child's play. "Do you want to tell me what's going on?" Iris looked up from the notebook, her gaze carrying a wisdom beyond her years. "The story lady said today is the day of truth," she replied simply, turning her attention back to the numbers. In the study, George was trying to focus on his documents when Eleanor entered, carrying a tray with coffee. Her hands trembled slightly. "Mr. George," she began, hesitant, "there's one more thing I need to tell you. The night the girl arrived, during that storm, I saw something. I was at the kitchen window when a figure passed through the garden. It looked like your mother." George felt a chill run down his spine. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I thought I was going crazy," Eleanor replied, sitting down heavily. "But now, with everything that's happening, the things Iris knows, the places she describes, that song she sings," the phone rang, interrupting the conversation. It was Barbara Klein. "Mr. Vanderbilt, I've discovered something about Iris's past that you need to know urgently. I'm on my way to your house." Meanwhile, in the garden, Iris was playing with Thor when Thomas arrived, accompanied by a woman of approximately 36 years old, premature grey hair and deep-set eyes that carried the weight of many secrets. Celeste. Berger seemed to have aged decades in the last 15 years. Iris's reaction was immediate. Upon seeing Celeste, the girl ran into the house, screaming words that no one could understand. Thor followed her, barking agitatedly. George received everyone in the library. Celeste sat on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap, trembling visibly. Thomas remained standing restless near the window. "Before we start," Celeste said, her voice hoarse as if it hadn't been used in a long time, "I need you to understand. One thing, everything I did was to protect that child." At that moment, Barbara arrived, carrying a thick folder of documents. Her face was pale. "Sorry to interrupt, but this can't wait. I found Iris's original records. Olivia, who had come down with the girl, was trying to calm her in the hallway. Iris had begun to recite numbers in sequence, as if she were deciphering a code that only she knew." "The truth," Celeste began, "is that Iris isn't my daughter. I saved her from the fire at the factory when she was just a baby. I was there that night because her mother, Mrs. Vanderbilt, had asked me to keep important documents that proved Thomas was embezzling money from the company and planning sabotage." Thomas advanced threateningly, but George stopped him. "Continue," he asked Celeste. "Your mother found out everything, George. The embezzlement, the sabotage plans, everything. She gathered evidence and planned to confront Thomas the next day, but something went wrong. The fire started earlier than expected." "No!" Thomas shouted, his voice trembling. "You don't know anything." But Celeste continued. "I found your mother in the factory that night. She was injured, but she managed to give me some documents and the locket. Protect the truth," she said, "and protect little Iris." A heavy silence fell over the library. Barbara cleared her throat, opening her folder. "The records I found confirm part of this story. Iris was registered at the local hospital 3 days before the accident at the factory. But the most impressive thing is this." She held out a yellow document. George took the paper with trembling hands. It was a birth certificate. The mother's name made his heart stop. Marina Santos. "Marina," he whispered. "The former factory secretary?" "Yes," Celeste confirmed. "Marina discovered the truth about Thomas by accident. She was pregnant and planned to leave town, but your mother convinced her to stay, promising to protect her. Marina gave birth to Iris days before the accident." In the hallway, Iris had stopped reciting numbers. Now she was drawing frantically, reproducing with frightening precision the scene that Celeste was describing. "The documents your mother gave me," Celeste continued, "proved not only Thomas's crimes, but also contained a will. She left a considerable part of the family's assets to Marina and the child, guaranteeing their future. Thomas found out and..." "Enough!" Thomas shouted, pulling something out of his pocket, a small remote control. "Don't you understand? I did all this for the family. That woman was going to destroy everything we built." "What remote is that, Thomas?" George asked, his heart racing. A bitter smile crossed Thomas's face. "The same kind I used that night." "Did you really think the fire was accidental?" "I had everything planned. I just didn't expect so many people to be at the factory that night." At that moment, a sharp scream cut through the air. Iris was standing in the doorway of the library, her eyes fixed on Thomas, her small body trembling. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember everything now." The drawing in her hand showed with frightening clarity the scene of the accident, the remote control, the strategically positioned explosives, the figure of Thomas in the shadows. It was a baby's memory, preserved in the subconscious and released through her drawings. "The story lady," Iris said, her voice strangely calm, "isn't a ghost. It's Grandma Vanderbilt's memory, stored here." She touched her own forehead. "She's been showing me everything from the beginning, so that the truth could come to light." Thomas looked at his niece with a mixture of horror and fascination. The remote control slipped from his trembling hand, falling to the carpet with a thud. In the next moment, everything changed. The wind blew strongly through the library windows, making the curtains dance violently. The silence that followed Iris's revelation was deafening. Thomas had leaned against the wall, his legs weakening as the truth of his past actions finally came to light. Olivia, who was watching everything from the door, realized something extraordinary. All the drawings Iris had made in recent months, scattered throughout her activity folder, formed a perfect chronological sequence of the events of that fateful night. They weren't just a child's scribbles. They were memories preserved with photographic precision. "The numbers," Olivia whispered, flipping frantically through her notebook. "They're not just random mathematical equations. They're coordinates, dates, values. Iris has been recording everything in code all this time." George approached the girl, kneeling down to be at eye level with her. "How did you know all this, little one?" Iris took the locket she was carrying and opened it carefully. Inside was a small photograph that no one had noticed before. Her grandmother, pregnant next to Marina Santos. The two smiled at the camera, their hands intertwined in a gesture of deep friendship. "The story lady, Grandma Vanderbilt, started visiting me in my dreams when I was still at the shelter," explained Iris, her childish voice carrying a surprising maturity. "She showed me the way here to you, Uncle George. She said I needed to fix things, do justice." Eleanor, who had been silently watching everything, approached with an old box in her hands. "I found this in the attic last night, Mr. George. I think it makes sense now." Inside the box were dozens of letters exchanged between his mother and Marina Santos, revealing a deep friendship and a plan to protect Iris. Celeste spoke, her voice choked. "Marina trusted your mother when she found out she was pregnant. She knew too much about Thomas's shady dealings, and he was threatening her. Your mother promised to protect both Marina and the child, but I found out everything," Thomas interrupted, his voice breaking. "I found the letters, the documents, that proved my embezzlement. Marina was going to report everything, and your mother, George, was going to support her. I couldn't allow it." Barbara Klein, who had remained silent, absorbing all the revelations, cleared her throat. "The documents I found confirm all of this. Marina Santos disappeared after the accident, but not in the way we thought." She opened her folder and removed a yellowed envelope. "Marina survived the accident, but suffered serious injuries. She spent months in a hospital in Rochester under another name to protect herself. When she was discharged, she discovered that her daughter had disappeared with Celeste." "I had no choice," Celeste defended, tears streaming down her face. "Marina was in a coma. Thomas was looking for the child. and the last order I received from Mrs. Vanderbilt was to protect Iris at all costs. George felt the weight of 15 years of lies collapsing on his shoulders. Where is Marina now? A noise at the library door made everyone turn. A woman of approximately 35 years old was standing there, her eyes fixed on Iris. She wore a simple dress and had the same deep and expressive eyes as the girl. "Mom," Iris whispered, her voice trembling. Marina Santos took a step forward, silent, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter." The reunion was interrupted by a shout from Thomas. He had recovered the remote control from the floor and was holding it with trembling hands. "No one will believe you. I have backups of all the compromising family documents. If I go down, everyone goes down with me." It was then that something extraordinary happened. Thor, who had been quietly in a corner of the library, began to bark furiously at the bookshelf. Iris, as if guided by an invisible force, walked over there and pulled out a specific book. Grimm's Fairy Tales, her grandmother's favorite. The book wasn't really a book, but a disguised box. Inside, it was an old flash drive and a set of original documents. "The story lady showed me where it was," Iris said softly. "She kept everything here, knowing that one day I would find it." Thomas let the remote control fall again, this time collapsing into a nearby armchair. His face was as pale as wax. How did you know?" "Because Grandma always knew this would happen," Iris replied. "She prepared everything, the dreams, the drawings, the numbers. It was her plan to do justice." Marina approached her daughter, hugging her for the first time in 15 years. "Your grandmother promised she would protect us, even after she was gone, and she kept her promise." George watched the scene with a whirlwind of emotions. The treasure he had been looking for wasn't the family locket. It was the truth, carefully preserved and transmitted through the extraordinary connection between his mother and his great-niece. Olivia, who had been analyzing Iris's drawings, made a surprising discovery. "Look at this," she said, holding out one of the most recent drawings. It showed the library exactly as it was now, with everyone gathered, and in the corner there was a small inscription in Iris's childish handwriting. "The real treasure is family reunited." The wind blew again through the windows, softer this time, bringing with it the scent of jasmine from the garden, the same flowers that George's mother loved so much. On the wall, the old clock marked exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the same time when 15 years ago a series of choices changed the destiny of the Vanderbilt family forever. But now, on that afternoon of revelations, a new chapter was about to begin. And while Thomas faced the consequences of his actions, a little 6-year-old girl who carried within her the wisdom of generations smiled serenely, knowing that her mission was almost complete. What no one noticed in that moment of intense emotions was that Thor had sat down next to Iris, his eyes fixed on a specific point in the library where, for a brief instant, the silhouette of a smiling lady seemed to appear. Just one more secret kept in the hearts of those who knew that some bonds are too strong to be broken, even by time. The December sun bathed upstate New York with its golden light, transforming the windows of the Vanderbilt mansion into shimmering stained glass. 3 months had passed since the revelations in the library, and life had found a new rhythm, lighter and truer. On that Saturday morning, George watched from the garden as Iris and Marina planted flowers in the flower bed near Thor's doghouse. The girl was explaining animatedly to her mother the meaning of each flower, a knowledge inherited from conversations with her grandmother in the dreams that, although less frequent now, still happened occasionally. "The white roses were Grandma's favorites," Iris said, her little hands dirty with soil. "She said they mean new beginnings." Marina smiled, tucking a strand of her daughter's hair behind her ear. After 15 years apart, every moment together was precious. She had moved to an apartment near the mansion, allowing Iris to maintain her routine with George while they built new family bonds. Eleanor came out to the garden, carrying a tray with lemonade. In recent months, the housekeeper had become even more protective of Iris, treating her like the granddaughter she never had. "Look who's here," she announced, pointing to the gate. Olivia was arriving carrying a colorful folder. After the events of that afternoon in the library, she had become more than a teacher. She was a friend of the family, helping Iris develop her extraordinary talents in a healthy and balanced way. "I brought a surprise," Olivia said, sitting on the garden bench. "Remember those numbers you used to draw, Iris? Well, a university in Boston is very interested in your unique method of solving mathematical problems. They want to develop an educational program based on your way of thinking." Iris smiled, but her eyes sought the approval of Marina and George. In recent months, she had learned that she no longer had to carry the weight of her special abilities alone. "The decision is yours, little one," George said softly. As her uncle and official godfather, the shared adoption papers had been finalized the previous month. He had learned to respect his niece's time and choices. The legal process against Thomas was underway, but in a way that surprised everyone. After his full confession, he had shown genuine remorse. Instead of seeking revenge, the family opted for an agreement that included financial restitution and community service. Thomas now spent his days helping in the reconstruction of the old factory, which would be transformed into a cultural center for underprivileged children. "You know," Marina said, sitting next to George, "sometimes I still wonder how your mother knew all this would happen. Iris's dreams, the drawings, even the right moment for each revelation." George smiled, recalling his mother's wisdom. "She always said that true love transcends time. I think she found a way to prove it." Barbara Klein, who was arriving for her monthly follow-up visit, stopped to observe the scene. The report in her folder documented Iris's extraordinary adaptation to her new reality: excellent academic performance, healthy emotional development, and, most importantly, the strengthening of family ties. "The story lady appeared in my dream yesterday," Iris commented casually while watering the newly planted flowers. "She was smiling a lot. She said she can now rest in peace because her family is united again." Thor, who was lying near the flower bed, raised his head suddenly, his ears perked up. The wind blew softly, bringing the scent of white roses. For a moment, everyone felt a welcoming presence, like a silent embrace. That night, during the family dinner, which now included not only George, Marina, and Iris, but also Eleanor and often Olivia, the conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and plans for the future. On the wall of the dining room, a new portrait had been added to the family gallery. The photo from the locket, showing the friendship between the Vanderbilt matriarch and Marina, now restored and framed. "Mom!" Iris called, her eyes sparkling. "With a new idea, can I show you the special place in the garden where Grandma and I used to talk in my dreams?" Marina nodded, touched. Together, mother and daughter walked to the moonlit garden. George watched them through the window, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The treasure he had been looking for was never lost. It was there all along, in the love that his mother nurtured for the family, strong enough to transcend time and guide a little girl back home. Eleanor approached, wiping away a discreet tear. "You know, Mr. George, your mother always said that the greatest riches cannot be kept in safes." "That's true," he replied, watching Iris show Marina the jasmine bush, where the whole story began. The real treasure was this: our family reunited, the truth restored, the love recovered. In the garden, Iris and Marina sat on the bench under the jasmine. The girl closed her eyes, smiling serenely. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I can still hear Grandma singing that old lullaby. She says it's your turn to sing it to me now, Mom." Marina hugged her daughter, gently beginning to sing the same melody that Iris was humming on the day she arrived at the mansion. Thor lay down at their feet like a faithful guardian. And somewhere, between the starry sky and the fragrant garden, the Story Lady smiled, knowing that her greatest treasure, the love of her family, was finally safe. The mansion clock struck 9 o'clock, its chimes echoing across the property. But now, instead of marking the hours of loneliness and secrets, it announced a new time of truth, of healing, of family. And Iris, the little girl who carried within her the wisdom of generations, knew that some stories don't need hidden treasures or great mysteries. They just need hearts open enough to believe in the transformative power of love.